Hello everyone, welcome to my new playlist, the Systemic Functional Linguistic Gender-Based Approach. And in this video, the first video in this playlist actually, we are going to discuss a SFL gender-based approach to teaching language. And this is just an introduction. And this playlist, the videos in this playlist are actually the continuation of the videos in another playlist. That is the playlist where I discuss the systemic functional linguistic uh, comprehensively. So if you are new to my channel, uh, just make sure that before you continue to watch the videos in this playlist, this video and in the video, other videos in the futures, hopefully, uh, you are encouraged to look at the videos where I discuss the systemic functional linguistics. Okay, we have an outline here where we will revisit the systemic functional linguistics to see what it is and to just a brief overview to the concepts of this language theory, and then we will try to look at how different genre theories define the term genre, and then we will go into the systemic functional linguistics genre-based approach, especially to teaching language, and then we will see how this approach uh, manifests into pedagogical practice. Uh, that is what we call the teaching learning cycle or TLC, which have four stages in it. Okay, so let's begin. Now, I would like you to remember what the systemic functional linguistics is. Okay? So, the systemic functional linguistics is a language theory developed by Michael Alexander Kirkwood Halliday. He is a British linguist. He had a long story. Uh, he was a language teacher, an English teacher in China, uh, just before he moved to Australia, and then he taught some scholars in Australia in the University of Sydney, and then from that university, from his teaching of language in that university, the scholars in Australia developed the approach that we are going to discuss in this video. Okay, so as I discussed in my system functional linguistics playlist, this linguistic theory has several basic principles or tenets, if you like. Okay, the first one is that this theory sees language as a social semiotic system. Okay, so Halliday says that language is a resource for humans to make meaning, to negotiate meaning in a particular context, and very central to this principle is that the text is also what is I mean always created in the context. As you can see here, I use the plural noun context here because systemic functional linguistics distinguish between the context of culture and the context of situation, or what we call a register. Okay, and then the second principle is that language is a multifunctional resource. So as a multifunctional resource, language is not only used to express our idea, but also to interact with other people, and some elements in the language are also used to create a coherent text. Okay, And then the meta function here, if you still remember, there are three functions or basic functions of language. The first one is called the ideational meta function. That is the function of language to express our experience about the reality or our ideas about the reality. And then the second one is the interpersonal meta function, uh, which emphasizes the function of language to enact social relationship between the speakers and the listeners, or the writers and the reader. Okay, and then the last one is the textual meta function, uh, which is about how language is used to organize the text, organize the message, okay, or information in the text. And then the third tenet is that language as a system of choices. So, systemic functional linguistics doesn't see uh, language or grammar as rules, but as a choice. Okay? So, in that theory, we make choice. Okay, we make choice in creating the text, in creating meaning, making the meaning. We choose different words when we create a text in different context. Okay, so as I have discussed in those videos, we have some three values of registers. The first one is the field, which emphasizes the variability of language depending on the field of the discourse. And then the tenor variable of register emphasizes that uh, we choose particular words over other words based on the people we are interacting with through language. And then the mode, okay, the mode value or the mode variable of the register is related to uh, how we use different cohesive devices to organize the language, or uh, the variability of language between the spoken language and the written language. Okay, so we choose a particular language resource based on the type or the channel of the communication, whether or yeah, in everyday communication we know that we we don't speak like we write, and vice versa. Okay, so that is the register. Okay, so there is a field which is related to the topic. Okay, and then the tenor, which is related to the relationship, social relationship between the interactants, and then the mode variable of the register, which is related to the mode of communication, the channel of the communication. Is it a spoken language, spoken communication? Is it a written interaction? Is it a face-to-face interaction, or uh, distant communication like through phones or emails? Okay, like so. And then we have also discussed several major systems for describing language, because systemic functional linguistics is descriptive linguistics. Okay? It is not a prescriptive linguistic, but descriptive linguistic, and the orientation is the function and not the form. So, systemic functional linguistics provides us with tools or systems to describe the language, and these systems are very useful for language teachers or language researchers to to describe the language. For example, the teacher can describe the language of the students like describing the quality of a student's essay, not just by saying that okay, this essay is persuasive, but by using what we call meta language, which is very important in understanding and describing language. Meta language is the language used to describe or to talk about language. The first one is the transitivity system, which is related to the ideational or experiential meta function. Okay? Then the mood system uh, is related to or is used to analyze the interaction type and what is being exchanged through the interaction. The modality system is related to the stance or position that a speaker or the writer takes in in expressing uh, or in discussing something. Okay, the modality like the use of modal verbs like can, will, should, and must, may, and so on and so forth. Okay, those words also other words. Okay, function to uh, express the model meaning, what we call model meaning or model assessment. And then the appraisal system, which is used to analyze the evaluation through language, how speakers or writers evaluate things or other people, whether that is a positive evaluation or negative evaluation, and so on and so forth. And then the theme rim system, which is related to the textual meta function, to analyze how speakers or writers organize the message in the text to create a coherent text. The transitivity system is associated with the ideational and experiential meta function and the field register. And while the mode, modality, and appraisal systems are related to the interpersonal meta function, and the theme ring system is associated with the textual meta function. In systemic functional linguistics, contexts are divided into two types. That is, the first one is the context of culture, which is the genre, and then the context of situation, which is the register. But in systemic functional linguistics, Halliday didn't explore further about the genre, or the concept of genre is associated with the textual meta function or the mode uh, variable of the register, because according to Halliday, genre is related to mm, how the text is organized. Okay, but as we will see later, uh, other scholars uh, think that the genre deserves its meta function as well. So uh, they explore and expand the concept of genre, and that is where the genre-based approach come from. Okay, and now we look at how different theories define genres, and I took this explanation from Ken Highland's book, Genre and Second Language Writing, published in 2004. So in that book, Highland explained there are at least three theories of genre or three schools of genre. The first one is the new rhetoric. Uh, this new rhetoric uh, defines genre as a social action that responds to recurring rhetorical situation rather than just a formal text type. Genres are dynamic and are learned through social participation. So genre is a social action means that it is something that people do or use to achieve a particular social uh, function or social purpose that responds to recurring rhetorical situation, which means that um, a genre is created through repeated rhetorical situation, repeated language use. Okay? But genres are dynamic. It is not as stable or static as we will see in the Sydney School's perspective of genre, and are learned through social participation. So we learn genre by being immersed in the use of the genre in the real situation where we use language to accomplish or to achieve a particular social purpose or communication purpose. Okay, and then we can also say that the new rhetoric uh, focuses more on the the action, the social action of the genre instead of the language. Okay? So it is more ethnographic than linguistic, we can say so. And then the genre analysis, which is developed by John Swales, and also known as the English for specific purposes. Genres in this theory are defined as purposeful and patterned communicative events that develop over time to serve specific functions and are learned through examination of text based on their purpose within the specific discourse communities, focusing on how genres and registers facilitate communication among their members. There is no sharp distinction or difference between these genre theories because they agree that genres are purposeful and pattern. There, there are patterns in genres, okay, and and genres are used to to attain or to achieve a social or communicative purpose. But instead of learning through social participation, genre analysis or James Wells argues that genres are learned through the analysis of genre, the analysis of text. And at this part, in this part, genre analysis is similar to the Sydney School's perspective of genre. Okay, but genre analysis is specified to or the target of this theory of genre is for students at the tertiary level and up. Okay, and this is also linguistics, but very less ethnography. And the last one, the Sydney School, uh, from which the theory of genre is taken and discussed in this video. They define genres as socially recognized, staged, and goal-oriented processes with specific purpose, structures, and linguistic features, and are learned through explicit genre instruction and teacher scaffolding. Genres are textile. Okay? So, from one point of view, the Sydney School is different from the new rhetoric in terms of whether the genre equals textile. Okay? Yeah, according to new rhetoric, genres are not textile, but in Sydney School, uh, genres are textiles, which means that uh, genres in Sydney School is a static or a stable thing. It is not as dynamic as what the new rhetoric says about gender. And uh, they are also different in terms of how genders are learned by students. The Sydney School uh, argues that genders must be taught explicitly, and students must be scaffolded in their learning of gender because they argue that students come into the classroom with unequal language proficiency and general knowledge. So that's why, in order uh, give them equal chance uh, to learn and master or improve their control of the genre, be they need to be taught about the genre explicitly, and in the learning process they need to be scaffolded by the teacher, and that principle uh, gave birth to the teaching learning cycle that we will see in the next slides. So that is the uh, way genres are defined. So we can look at the similarity uh, between these three theories of genre. They agree that genre is a social action, not action, but genre has its social purpose, communicative purpose, and genres genres have patterns, different patterns, structure. Okay, but they are different in terms of how genres are learned, and Sydney School, because uh, it, it keeps the balance between the ethnographic side of ethnographic aspect of genre and the linguistic aspect of the genre. So uh, they argue that the scholars of Sydney School argue that genres have purpose, structures, and also linguistic features. Different genres have different register, and hopefully in the future uh, I will make some videos to discuss the schematic structures and the linguistic features of each genre. So now we look at the systemic functional linguistic genre-based approach to teaching language, and this is this focuses on the Sydney School theory of genre. Okay, well, because this approach is based on systemic functional linguistics, so the principles of the systemic functional linguistics are also uh, included, or also they also construct the core principles of this gender-based approach. The first principle is that language is a social and functional tool. So we have discussed that. Okay. So language is not a cognitive entity; it is a social entity, and it has function to express idea, to interact with other, and also to organize the text coherently. And then the second one is that text is contextual. This is also obvious that every text is created and exchanged in particular context. Like Holiday said that text from text we can predict the context, and the context determines the text. Okay? And This gender-based approach also uh, adopts Vygotsky's zone of proximal development theory, which emphasizes the teacher scaffolding and explicit instruction. That's why the third core principle of this gender-based approach is that students need to be taught explicitly and scaffolded in their learning process. And still related to Vygotsky's theory of ZPD, the next core principle of this gender-based approach is that language learning is not an individual process but a social process and should be text-based. So the text is also the aim of the learning process, the language learning process, because systemic functional linguistics focuses on text as a language or linguistic unit, meaningful linguistic unit. Okay, so they need to learn from the text, and then the next one is that the aim of language learning is linguistic equity. As I said before, that this approach aims to provide students with equal chance to success in the learning process. And the last one is that teaching genres means teaching the social purposes, schematic structures, and linguistic features of uh, the genres. And now we can see how the systemic functional linguistics gender-based approach manifests into pedagogical instruction. Okay, it is called the teaching learning cycle or TLC. The model that I used here is the model developed by Rotary, Isai from Emilia, 2005. Um, the purpose of this teaching learning cycle model is to systematically teach genres to students and to scaffold their learning. And to achieve this purpose, this model adopts Halliday's system of functional linguistics and Vygotsky's ZPD. Halliday's SFL provides the basis for linguistic features and the context in which the genre or the text genre is created. And then we're using both theories, and I think there are uh, other theories that are included into this model, but these two theories are very prominent in the approach or in the model. And those theories are uh, realized into the stages of this model. In this model, the first one is the negotiating field, or what we call it, building knowledge of the field. This one, I think the text is small enough to read, but it's fine because I will explain to you in the next slides. And then the construction or modeling here, joint construction here, and independent construction. And as you can see that this stage is built a cycle, and that's why it is called the teaching learning cycle. So the purpose is important here, uh, to systematically teach journalists to students to to ensure that they have control of the genre. Control of the genre means that they can create text in a particular genre. So genres are text types in this model, like persuasive text, argumentative explanatory, narrative, and so on and so forth. They are genres, they are text types. So text types uh, entails three things. That is the social purpose of the text, the schematic structures, the stages and the phases in each stage, and then the linguistic features, the linguistic characteristics of the genres, or the language resources that writers or speakers use to create the genres to achieve the social or communicative purpose of language use. Okay, now we come to the first stage in the TLC, that is the building knowledge of the field, or DKOF. So first we need to understand that the term field in BKOF is one of the system of the register variables, SFL register variables. That the first variable of the register is the field, which is associated with the topic, okay, the content of the text. The purpose of this stage is to build the necessary background content knowledge and vocabulary related to the topic, like to teach the technical terms, verbs used to describe the processes, how students create or use nominal groups to create participants, like in the transitivity system. Okay? But the very uh, purpose of this stage is to provide students with enough topical or content knowledge about what they are, for example, what they are writing about. Okay? So the first one, we need to understand that the purpose is to teach students about the topic, about the content, not about the genre. Okay? Not about the genre. So for example, in teaching writing, for instance, in my PhD research, I teach students how to write an argumentative essay, especially analytical exposition about the use of artificial intelligence in academic settings. So the topic is that the use of AI in academic settings, in academic writing, for example. So that is the topic. So we talk about that. We discuss the ethics of AI, and then the potential and the limitations of AI, how AI can help students in writing, how uh, reliance of on AI can deter students' creativity and critical thinking, and so on and so forth. So we didn't talk about the analytical exposition yet, but we talked about the topic. Okay, that is the first stage of this model. So to achieve the purpose, we can uh, carry some activities like here. First one, we identify the field, we decide the topic with the students or based on the curriculum, and then we elicit students' existing knowledge of the field. This is very important because gender-based approach is need-based. Okay? So we need to know what the students know about the field, about the topic, by asking them questions, and then connect their old knowledge with the new knowledge that we are presenting in the classroom. Maybe we want to change or to correct their old knowledge if they are mistaken about the topic. We add new knowledge, to their old knowledge, and so on and so forth. And then we organize and present the topic. We can discuss in the classroom. We can invite students to do research. We can also invite experts related to the topic. Okay, and then we can do field trip with students. There are many activities that we can carry out to build students' content or topic of knowledge. And then uh, they need to record the field knowledge and field related vocabulary, like taking notes, for example, writing reflective notes about what they have learned, and including the words, the technical terms uh, related to the field or the topic. And then we can test their understanding of the topic by asking questions or by inviting them to ask questions about the topic. So testing students' understanding is not necessarily at the end of the cycle, but at the end of each stage in the cycle. So that is the first stage. In conclusion, the building knowledge of the field uh, aims to provide students with sufficient content or topic of knowledge that they are going to speak about or to write about. And the next one is modeling, and this is where the students are explicitly taught about the genre. So the purpose, as you can see here, the purpose is to familiarize students with the genre that they are learning. For example, in teaching analytical exposition, the modeling stage aims to make them familiar with analytical exposition. And the activities that we can carry out in the stage, the first one is we need to select some model text of the same genre. So in teaching analytical exposition, for example, I collected and selected some text, analytical exposition text, real text from the internet, from journal articles. If you are familiar with the journal publication, you will know that one type of paper is called opinion piece. Opinion piece is an opinion article, and opinion article is argumentative article. Okay, so I took uh, 3 or 4 texts and used them as the model. And it is important to emphasize the word some here, which means that we need to have more than one sample text or model text. Because if we only present one model text, then it will give an impression that writing is a process of imitating the published text. But no, we need to provide some models so that students can understand that writing or using language to write is a matter of choice. So they understand the genres, and then they choose the way or the way they create their text in the same genre. Okay, and then we explain the social purpose of the genre. So we focus on uh, the social or communicative purpose of the genre. For example, when I taught analytical exposition, I explained that analytical exposition aims to persuade people whether or not something is the case, okay, by presenting a position, a claim and then support the claim with sound arguments before we conclude in the text. So that is the purpose that we need to explain to students. And then we display the model text, for example, using projector, if written language, written text, or audio player, if that is a spoken language or spoken text. So we display the text so all students can see or can listen to the text. And then we present the schematic structure of the journals. So we deconstruct the text into stages. For example, we can invite students to look at the first part of the essay, or this is the thesis. These are the arguments, and this is where the writer concludes uh, his or her arguments like that. Okay, so we present the schematic structure, we deconstruct, and it is important to invite students to collaborate in the deconstruction process, so that they experience the true learning experience instead of just passively listening to the teacher's oral explanation. And after presenting the schematic structures, we continue to present the linguistic features of the genre. And typically in a genre-based approach, we need to look at the field, tenor, and mode in terms of register. Okay, because register is the variability of language which is used in the particular context, and genre is the context. Okay, and to ease the process, we look at the linguistic features in each stage. The linguistic features in the first stage, the middle, and then the last stage. We we look at how the writer use technical terms to describe or to deliver the content, to talk about the topic, okay? And then the tenor, how the writer engage with other writers or with the reader through the text, and then the mode, the linguistic features used by the writer to organize the message in the text. And then the last one, we also test students' understanding, for example, by uh, asking them to identify the stages in in one of the model texts. For example, in my case, I had three model texts. I explained to them two of them, and the last one I kept for the students. So at the end of the session, I invited the students to deconstruct the text in terms of the social purpose, the schematic structures, and the linguistic features of the analytical exposition genre. So that is the modeling stage, which aims to familiarize students with the genres that they are learning. And the third stage is called joint construction. Construction here is the process of uh, making or constructing the text. Systemic functional linguistic genre-based approach use the term construction because this model is not only used to teach writing but also speaking, reading, listening, and so on and so forth. Okay, so in teaching writing, for example, joint construction can be understood as joint writing or collaborative writing. Okay, and the purpose of this stage is to scaffold students' learning before they can produce text independently. Okay, and also according to Pauline Gibbons, an SFL GBA scholar in Australia. She said that the joint construction stage is also used to model the writing process in teaching writing, for example. Okay, so the writing process like planning, drafting, or writing, and then rewriting are also modeled in this stage. Okay? And there are two types in which we can carry out this stage. The first one is we group students uh, in two or three, and then we guide them to collaboratively write text, or we don't group the students, but we as as the teachers and the students collaboratively write or construct a text. Okay? And there are some activities that we can carry out in the stage. The first one, and because this stage also models the writing process, we need to create a writing plan. Okay? We can do that by providing students a general template, which is basically an outline, and that outline is created based on the schematic structures of the genre. Okay, so because we have discussed the schematic structure of the genre, we can create the outline based on that schematic structure. First, we need to do this or write this, and then we continue with this, and then the end we uh, write this. For example, like that. Uh, in the writing process approach, an essay is typically divided into three stages. We call that introduction, or the opening, or the beginning, and then the middle, or the body, and then the last part, the conclusion. But as we will see in future videos, each genre has their level, okay, for each stages in the schematic structure. So the basic idea in this activity is that we create an outline and use that outline for students to write the genre. And then we decide on the topic related to the field being learned in the first stage, the BKOF stage. And that is very important because we need to stick with the topic, or the topic. So uh, we don't ask students to write what we don't discuss. Okay? So we write what we have discussed. We just need to decide the topic. Okay? For example, uh, the topic that I taught my students was the use of AI in academic settings. That is the broad topic, and the specific topic that they wrote in the joint construction stage is that whether it is ethical to use AI to write the entire essay, academic essay. Okay? And then we get students to jointly construct the text, especially when we use the type 1. And we invite students to contribute ideas and sentences in the process of constructing the text. For instance, we can ask students, how do we start this stage? How do we introduce the topic? How do we begin the claim? How do we support the claim? What arguments uh, are needed to support this claim, and so on and so forth. So they contribute ideas, sentences, words, and so on. Okay? But the scaffolding process here uh, is realized when we provide students with alternatives, okay, alternative ideas and alternative sentences, which according to us are better, more grammatical, clearer, stronger, and so on and so forth, based on systemic functional grammar, okay, or traditional grammar if we are not familiar with systemic functional grammar. So that is the learning process. The scaffolding process takes place there when we suggest or we provide students with better alternatives, alternative ideas, alternative sentence. We can provide students with feedback. We can correct students' ideas or student sentences, and that is where learning happens. And we type their contribution. Okay, for example, we can use the projector to display the genre template. Okay, and then while we ask students to contribute and we provide them with alternative ideas and sentences, we also type type the ideas, the sentences there. So we really model the writing process. We plan, we start writing, we make change, we amend, we revise, and so on and so forth. We use feedback for revision and so on and so forth. Okay, that is the joint construction. So at the end of this stage is a jointly constructed text. In my case, the end is one complete essay, argumentative essay, especially analytical exposition about whether it is ethical to use AI to write the entire essay. Okay, and this stage should not be skipped. And then the last one is the independent construction stage. This is where we allow students to start writing their essays independently, but it is important to know that the topic that they will write in the independent construction should not be similar to the topic they write in the joint construction that they wrote in the joint construction stage. Although the theme is still similar, the broad topic is still that, but the specific topic, the title, should be different. So we can see that the learning that they experience in the three previous stages uh, can be transferred into independent writing. Okay? As you can see here, the purpose is to gradually release students' responsibility for their learning. This is where the teacher draws from the students. All supports like scaffolding and feedback are withdrawn from the instruction. But it doesn't mean that the students no longer provide students with assistance. Okay? When necessary, the students are assisted and guided by the teacher. To begin with, we revisit the social purpose, schematic structures, and linguistic features of the genre and also the writing process. So we provide them with an overview of how to plan, how to draft, how to revise, the importance of revising their essays, and so on and so forth. And then students choose a topic related to the field, and as I said before, it should be different from the topic in the joint construction stage. And then we also need to ensure that students have supportive writing environment. For example, uh, are they uh, do they write using laptop or or tablet, or they write using paper and pens and so on and so forth? Whether the physical environment is uh, we need to ensure that the physical environment is not noisy, so they uh, they are ready to start writing their essay independently. And also, some scholars say that independent construction uh, can be taken home, so they can write at home and then submit their essays through emails or submit the essays physically in the last meeting, in the next meeting. I mean, but it depends on the that is totally instructional decision made by the teacher, students, or the curriculum. And then we allow students to write their text, and also we provide feedback on their text and allowing them to revise. Why? Because as you know, the writing process, the stages in the writing process like pre-writing, writing, and rewriting also apply in the genre-based approach. And then we collect students' works. We can use students' works as a learning portfolio and not as a test. So uh, we don't test students' writing ability or speaking ability in by using their independent construction product. Okay, because this is still a stage in the learning cycle. So if we want to test students' writing ability after the instruction, we need to have a separate final writing test and not the text they created in the independent construction stage. Okay, that's all. The four stages TLC model, which is derived from the systemic functional linguistics. Okay? Thank you for watching, and this is me and Professor Jim Martin, one of Halliday's students in the University of Sydney, one of the prominent scholars, the proponents of SFL genre-based approach. I I was very glad to have an opportunity to learn SFL and GBA right from him. Okay? This photo was taken when he visited us in a workshop of SFL and GBA at Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia, where I completed my uh, doctoral degree. Okay, I think enough, and in the next videos, hopefully we can discuss the social purpose, the schematic structure, and the linguistic features of different genres based on systemic functional linguistics genre-based approach. See you in the next video.